Friends, I don't do this very often, but I feel kind of compelled to do it tonight. I'm going to do a video where I just talk. I don't play guitar or monkey around with an amp or anything. And it's in response to a subscriber's question, or at least a commenter on YouTube. I'm going to read you his comment, and I'll tell you kind of what I dig about it. He says, as a newish Helix user, he's a newbie to the Helix, which wasn't that long ago that I was. This was really helpful. He's been watching a video that I did called Hear Every Amp and Cab Model in the Line6 Helix. And this is, of course, after firmware 3.15. So I just did a demo where I played just the amps and the cab models that are associated with those amps. And of course, you can switch out and play different cabs and stuff, but I digress. I think I just did that and maybe put some reverb on it. So just the amp, the cab, and some reverb, and I might have monkeyed around with a few parameters just to show some variation. It's what you could get with those. Sorry. You got a ton of British in here. As you should have, a lot of Marshalls. He says, I've been overwhelmed by options, and this is such a simple approach to working out which amps I might actually like that I'm kicking myself for not thinking of it myself. Thank you. Very, very cool comment. I also enjoyed your reaction to some of the high gain amps. And as a Brit, I was blown away by your accent. I'd love to know where you're from. So as a Brit, this is what happens to the British, Scottish, Irish accent when it's all fused together and mixed around for about 6 generations in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. So what I have is what's called a Scot-Irish Highlander accent, which is very common among the Blue Ridge Mountains. A lot of people say it sounds like a Texas accent. There are some similarities, I guess, but I think maybe it's because a lot of Scot-Irish people left North Carolina. My dad went to Fort Hood, Texas, and I think there's a lot of, anyway, I won't get off into that, my theories on accents, but yeah, Scot-Irish Highlander, you'll hear my kind of accent from, say, Ashe County, North Carolina, down past Asheville and on into the Southern Highlands. So I came from a place I came from an area very close to the tallest mountains in eastern United States. My mom was a Mitchell, so Mount Mitchell's the highest mountain in eastern North Carolina, or in the whole eastern half of the United States, east of the Mississippi. Mount Mitchell, 6,684 feet. My great-great-great-great-granddad, Elisha Mitchell, was the guy that they named it after. So yeah, I'm from that region there, a place called Little Switzerland, if you want to look it up on a Google map. And more specifically, the Deer Lick Gap of Little Switzerland, which is, there you go. People might have seen it in my videos. The thing I liked about this guy's comment, it says JP Spoons. JP, I too was absolutely stunned by what the Helix was, and so freaking confused by it. Not that the interface was hard or anything. It was almost like, holy cow, I'm a guy who is used to having one amp and maybe 3 pedals, and that's what I gigged with for 25, 30 years. I played for so long with just a 65 watt PV Bandit amp, and then I did get an older model of the Line6, one of the Spider 3 amps, when I wanted to try to get a little bit more modern, and still ended up going back to that PV more than anything. I used that. I used a delay pedal. I had a Tube Screamer, a MXR distortion, and a wah pedal, and a chorus. I think I did have a compressor too that I very seldom used. But anyway, that was sort of everything that I used. Never even had a pedal board. A lot of times wouldn't even take the pedals out. Would just use the 2 different channels on the PV and the reverb this had nice spring reverb in the old Bandit 65. So when I got a Helix, I was, first of all, just panning around going through it. I put the editor on my computer. I'm going, holy crap. And I found out what I would do is I would just work and work and work trying to figure out how to make these bizarre, cool, meticulous models and sit there and work with what is an impulse response? Good grief. How far behind the curve am I? And, it can be, you go watch people like John Cordy or any of these other guys that are really great with a Helix. I love to watch who's the guy? He's an Italian guy out of New York that does live shows, plays with Blue Oyster Cult. He does incredible things with the Helix. There are all kinds of Helix gurus out there, and they're making fantastic patches and stuff for it. But you know what the Helix is also great for is just getting an amp model and a cab and dialing a few buttons. I'm here to tell you, I almost didn't mess with my Helix for a year because I was intimidated by it. I went through a phase where I said, you know what, this is just too much. It's entirely too much. I started buying a bunch of cheap pedals and trying to put together pedal boards because I'd never really had a substantial pedal board, even though I've been playing gigs since I was 17 years old. And at least through my 20s and 30s, I played a lot. I haven't played so much since my 40s and 50s. Become sort of a YouTube guitar player, but I've been out there, and I just found out that I just didn't need that much, and I could play a broad range of music with just a bit of distortion, overdrive, reverb, sometimes some delay, sometimes some chorus, depending on what kind of songs you're playing. The Helix had a bazillion options for how to shape sounds, and I go watch these gurus do their programming. Excuse me, I got hiccups. And it was just entirely too much. Entirely too much for me. I did for a whole freaking year. I barely touched the thing. I would turn it on. I put on headphones. I'd say, what in the world am I doing? Does this sound convincing? One of the things I found out, this is me, my opinion, is when you go headphone out from the Helix, it doesn't sound as good as when you're feeding it into the board, or at least maybe it's the preamps on my little Zoom Live Track L12. I love to go out the XLRs, the back of the Helix, and into the board, and then I can tweak it a bit even with some stuff on the board and make it sound fantastic. So one of the things I would say is don't try to make the Helix into some wonder machine. It is, but go find patches that you will use. And here's the thing I think is interesting. I've probably programmed maybe 30 sounds. I would say between 25, maybe 35 sounds. And within each of my presets, I do have snapshots that I like. Maybe I've got snapshot 1 of a Fender Deluxe reverb that is very clean, with no compression on it, with just a touch of reverb, spring reverb or something, and I've EQ'd it just a little bit. Then maybe I've got another snapshot where I boost the gain up 25%, and I'm edge break up or a little beyond that, and that would be sort of a crunchy rhythm. And then these are snapshots now. These are not different sounds. These are variations of sounds that I've programmed. But I've probably not programmed, within the sounds, I might program 3 or 4 or 5 sounds that are snapshots. But the patches themselves, I don't think I've made 30. And what I found myself doing is the guitars that I like to play the most, the guitars I'm most inspired by, I'll make patches and variations specifically for those guitars. So I've got my old 89 Strat Telly behind me. I have probably half a dozen patches that I think sound, or presets, I keep calling patches, presets, that I think sound fantastic with a Telecaster. In particular, my Telecaster. I've thought, everything I program is no nonsense, and it sounds great with, for instance, a Les Paul, or I've been using a Washburn HB35 for my ES335 kind of sounds. I've been favoring that guitar for a couple of years. I bought that thing used, and it's fantastic. I got one of the Sycamore ones. So for my semi-hollow, I've got probably at least 4 or 5 sounds that I've programmed that have the snapshots and everything, and I use them for my semi-hollows. And then I've got some that I favor for Stratocasters. And then I got for my Gretsch, I've monkeyed around a good bit, and I have put some kind of chimey delay, kind of sparkly sort of, voxy kind of amps and stuff that I've put together to use with that Gretsch, and they sound just fantastic. You mentioned the high gain amps. I'm still not, like for the Friedmans and stuff that you can do some particularly really stout stuff with, the Ubersonics or whatever they are. I play around that a little bit. I just don't get into that kind of music so much. But man, it's nice to have. It's the thing I would say, if you're new, if you're intimidated by it as I was, to get over it, just start a preset, throw an amp on there, use the cabinet that comes with it, or if you want to just put just the amp and try out different cabinets, do that. Don't go in there tweaking just a whole lot. Just maybe go change your bass, your treble, your mids or whatever a little bit. Put you a nice reverb on and settle on that for a while and ruminate on the possibilities of simplicity. And right now I probably do have a few Helix patches that are complicated. I'm embarrassed to show my Helix patches or my presets, as I say, that I've created. I'm embarrassed to share it with people. I think they'd probably laugh me to scorn because they're so simple. That said, simplicity, I know it'll do. I know it has all the bells and whistles. I know it will do anything. But do you need everything? Do you need the kitchen sink? Very often, no, you don't. What you need your Vox amps. You need just a JCM 800. You need a Princeton. You need a Bassman. You need a deluxe reverb. What else have I done? I've got a high watt that I've programmed some sounds for that I think sounds really nice. I've got the rectified kind of sounds, a few of them. But you know what's interesting? I have a couple little cheap floor pedals, particularly one called the Californian pedal from Joyo that does that Mesa Boogie kind of sound. That and about a $20 T-Bamp modeler that I can sometimes use in combination, and I like it better than the rectified sounds I'm getting on my Helix. I don't have many presets where I'm using two amps, but two different amps, like an amp on one side and the other. Those are all things that, it might be kind of cool to do that if we're miking up amps. It sounds pretty cool on there too. I just am not finding a lot of applications for it. I guess it depends on what you're doing. If you're in a cover band and you have to sound like Eddie Van Halen on a song, you have to sound like Crowded House on another song, you have to sound like some sort of funk, or you got to have a real ambient wash type, edge kind of sound from U2, that sort of thing, then you might drive yourself crazy putting together a whole lot of different presets. My thought is, if you're feeling intimidated as I was, so this is the anti-intimidation Helix talk here. Just dive in with the simplest thing and learn how to love it for what it will do with just amps, cabs, and reverb. And it will do some fantastic things. I'm still just, at some point, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to do some crazy patches. Right now, I'm sort of doing that just with the Neural DSP plug-in things that you can get, the Tim Hintz and Rabia Masad. I'm enjoying doing those guitar sounds with sort of synthy sounding and ambient and way out there, because I find it very simple to do that with that interface. A little more difficult to program with the Helix. You could get all that sort of stuff, and it would even be cleaner, I'm sure. It'd be quieter, I'm quite certain. But still, it's pretty convenient to do those spacey kind of sounds. So I am exploring that, but it's easier to do that for me on the Neural DSP stuff on my MacBook Pro. So there you go, folks. I just thought it was cool to respond to this person who is a little bit overwhelmed with his Helix. As what he says, I've been overwhelmed by options. Use the simple approach, embrace it, and then start to dress it up. Here's what I would say. For me, the way my Helix progression has been is finding what I like about regular amps and with solid reverb, and if I had the option of having a lot of different cabinets to hook them up to, and find those things that I like the most about amp sounds anyway, and get happy with those. And now what I probably will start doing is making copies of some of those and adding phasing to it, or maybe I do try doing the left-right amp thing, or maybe I do ping pong delays and I don't know, shimmers and stuff like that. But right now I'm steering clear of all that. I'm trying to do whatever sounds good with a blues backing track or a rock backing track or whatever. And yeah, I am getting a bit out there with the Neural DSP stuff. So thanks for asking where I'm from. Look into it. North Carolina, Western North Carolina, the Highlands. Little Switzerland is where I grew up. I live in a different place now, about 45 miles east of there now. And enjoy that Helix, man. It still is a very awesome, viable, industry standard setting modeler. And it constantly blows my mind what can be done with it. But I'm not going to let it freak me out anymore. Peace to all who watch. Subscribe to the channel if you like.